Well, after the shooting massacres in El Paso and Dayton, Republicans and Democrats are pressing for red flag laws. And this is where both parties find common ground. Simply put, they want to give law enforcement or other parties the power to take action to try to prevent mass shootings when red flags pop up. For example, if police or family become aware of threatening activity, if they see something that indicates an individual could be dangerous, they would then have the power to petition a court to take that person's guns and or ability to buy guns through due process. Florida already passed a red flag law and others have followed suit. The proposal in Congress would encourage more states to follow Florida's lead by offering federal grants, among other things, to cover the cost of implementing such laws.
To incentivize states that have protective order red flag laws to make sure they have due process to protect the gun owner, but to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people.
But these proposals assume or depend on people taking action when they see red flags. And part of the problem has been, in hindsight, red flags can be missed. For example, after the Dayton massacre, law enforcement said there was nothing in the killer's background that would have stopped him from buying a gun. Then the Dayton mass killer's classmates say he had been suspended for coming to school with a rape list of female students he wished to rape. One woman said law enforcement called her to ask if she knew the future mass killer had placed her name on his rape list. And after that, she said the future mass killer was back at school, walking the halls with no advance warning that he was coming back. And then 1 year after that, classmates say the Dayton future mass killer was suspended again, this time for scrawling a hit list of fellow students in a school bathroom. Yet he was allowed to buy a gun later to carry out his massacre.
I ain't gonna never get those sounds out my head of just the gunshots and then the people screaming and the trampling and just the fear.
And then there was Parkland. The Broward Sheriff's Office took at least 23 calls relating to the future school shooter and his home. For example, more than 3 years ago, a caller told a deputy the future school shooter threatened to shoot up the school. The deputy passed it along to the school resource officer. 7 months after that, a peer counselor told the school resource officer that the future school shooter was cutting himself, seeking guns, and possibly drinking gasoline. The mental health counselor, though, did not want to take action to commit him. 5 days after that, DCF noted fresh cuts on his arm and other red flags and determined that the future school shooter was stable. 1 year later, a tipster warned the FBI that the future school shooter posted that he wanted to be a, quote, professional school shooter on YouTube. Though the FBI could not identify the future school shooter, even though he signed his threat or his aspiration to be a professional school shooter with his real first and last name. Then 2 months later, the future school shooter's family called the sheriff's office to report his weapons. The sheriff's office decided that the family instead could deal with that. And then later that month, the future school shooter's guardian called Palm Beach County deputies to say that he's making more threats to shoot people. And then the very next day, another tipster warned the sheriff that the future school shooter was collecting guns and is, quote, a school shooter in the making.
It looks pretty obvious that either the culture or policies of that office were not up to handling a situation like this.
About a month later, the FBI got a tip the future school shooter wants to, quote, kill people and may be planning to shoot up the school. And the FBI dropped the ball on that. Then in February of 2018, he shot up the school.
We understand everything wasn't done perfectly. Deputies make mistakes, police officers make mistakes, we all make mistakes.
What if the FBI had followed its own rules and alerted its Miami field office when it received warnings? What if DCF would have taken more seriously the concerns of school counselors? What if just one of those actions led to a more vigilant response? Lives, of course, may have been saved without changing any laws. Now, federal lawmakers in Congress are pursuing new legislation to give police and others more power to act on the hope and assumption that they would and will act when they see red flags. Well, Senator Marco Rubio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are co-sponsoring the red flag legislation in the Senate, but you've been co-sponsoring this for some length of time, going back to last year. Why has this not already passed when it has such strong bipartisan support?
That's a great question.
Why are you here? Why doesn't Senate leadership call everybody back and take a vote on something where they agree?
Well, you know, I'll be there right away if they do. So I asked for it. I filed this last February of 2018 in the new Congress. It makes all the sense in the world. It helps us because today, if you identify someone as dangerous, you can't do anything about the guns or the weapons they have until they commit a crime. Meaning, so the way this would work, how it works in Florida, is you have to go before a judge. It can only be a family member or someone who lives with you or law enforcement. You have to prove to a judge that this individual is a danger, and you have to meet a certain standard. And then they can issue a court order, which can't be any longer than a year, and you have to go back again next year.
It can help, but there's another challenge even if it does pass, because when you look clearly at Parkland, potentially Dayton as well, you have a lot of red flags that were there but were missed. So it wasn't so much agencies not having the power to take action, they just missed red flags that were hitting them in the face.
In the case of all three of those, in the case of Parkland back when it happened, in the case of Ohio today, in the case of Texas, they do not have red flag laws, meaning you cannot go to court today and remove a gun from someone no matter how many signs they've exhibited. Now, you could theoretically, you know, had the FBI or the sheriff's office or the school district followed through on those threats, maybe done some other things, but you could not, without a red flag law, you cannot remove guns from someone unless you get them adjudicated mentally incompetent or until they commit a crime and can't pass a background check. And red flag law allows us to get ahead of it. And by the way, it would prevent suicides too. If someone's suicidal, you have no legal way to take away their gun unless you have a red flag law. You have to go to court. Okay, this isn't just willy-nilly. A lot of people are concerned about that. There is due process. It's strong due process.
There's an approach that's the prevailing thought in the White House and Congress, particularly in the Senate, that we need to commit more to mental health services. Detractors would say, though, it stigmatizes people with mental illness and that they are not generally the culprits. Statistically, it tends to be, for example, in El Paso, white supremacy. That's not a mental illness. That's a choice. To that, you would say what?
I say that there's validity in that argument. There's also validity in the need for more mental health services. Let's put aside mass shootings for a second. We do have a stigma in society against mental health services because of what it means. We were just having this conversation earlier today at the VA. So there are people that don't seek help because of what it might mean. I think there's also a lack of services. We don't have enough providers in many communities for it. I do share that concern, that if mental health is equated to someone who's violent, people won't want to come forward and they won't want to refer their family members to mental health services. But you know, postpartum depression is treated as a mental health condition. There's a lot of other things, and those are clearly not conditions that you would associate with violence for the most part. And so I would say that these issues are difficult and they're nuanced, and today's media coverage and politics is not conducive to nuance. But we're dealing with human psychology, we're dealing with human behavior, we're dealing with hate in many cases with the white supremacists. And these are difficult issues and every one of these cases has nuances to them that need to be discussed that way.
Senator Rubio, thank you for your time.
Thank you.